What happens when an FBI agent is unjustly targeted by a police officer simply for enjoying a coffee break? Alicia Carter, one of the youngest African-American agents, is confronted with prejudice in a quiet cafe, sparking her determination to challenge systemic racism. Can her investigation into this officer's misconduct uncover the deeper, troubling patterns of abuse within law enforcement? How far will she go to seek justice? Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. It was a sunny afternoon when Alicia Carter, one of the youngest African-American FBI agents, decided to take a break after an exhausting meeting with her team. Determined to enjoy some personal time, she dressed casually in jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a baseball cap before driving to a quiet neighborhood cafe. The area exuded a small-town charm, and the cafe's inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee promised a moment of respite. Parking her car, Alicia locked it and walked to the entrance, where the soft chime of the door welcomed her into a warm, bustling space filled with gentle conversation and the clink of porcelain cups. She ordered a caramel latte and settled at a seat by the window, enjoying the peaceful view of people strolling along the sunlit sidewalk. For a few minutes, everything was as she had hoped, calm, untroubled, and ordinary. However, her serenity was shattered when a police car pulled into the parking lot. At first, Alicia paid little mind, assuming it was just another officer off duty. But soon her gaze fell upon a tall, stocky white officer with a stern expression. He stepped out with heavy, echoing boots, and without warning, strode purposefully into the cafe. His eyes fixed on Alicia as he approached her table, and the atmosphere shifted palpably. Stopping at her side, the officer demanded in a clipped, condescending tone, "Ma'am, can I see some ID?" Shocked by this abrupt intrusion and the baseless insinuation that she was loitering, Alicia maintained her calm composure. Despite her years of experience handling tense situations, she could not fathom why a law enforcement officer would single her out in a quiet cafe. As the other patrons watched silently, the officer's suspicion grew. His gaze darted over her casual attire with thinly veiled disdain. In that charged moment, Alicia realized that this was no ordinary encounter. His challenge was rooted in prejudice, and though she felt a surge of indignation, she resolved to stand her ground and not be intimidated by a display of unearned authority. Alicia's steady composure did little to satisfy the officer's escalating hostility. With her driver's license in hand, she met his probing questions with measured replies, even as his tone grew increasingly accusatory. "I'm not refusing," she said softly, "but I'd like to know why you're targeting me when I'm clearly minding my own business." His face hardened, and the officer's eyes narrowed as he declared, "You can make this easy or difficult. I'm going to need to see your identification." His words, laced with condescension, were meant not to confirm any legal breach, but to underscore his authority over her, as if her mere presence in the cafe was evidence of wrongdoing. As the tension mounted, the cafe's patrons grew silent, their glances shifting uneasily between the determined agent and the self-assured officer. Alicia could feel the weight of every stare and the palpable discomfort of the onlookers, yet she refused to yield. Internally, she recalled her training and years on the job, experiences that had taught her the importance of patience and measured resistance in the face of injustice. Though she was an FBI agent with considerable expertise in handling confrontations, today she was simply a citizen enduring an unwarranted display of power. The officer's posture, rigid and threatening, left no room for negotiation. "Are you refusing to cooperate?" he demanded, his voice rising imperiously. Alicia's heart pounded, yet she responded evenly. "I'm cooperating by providing my ID, but I deserve to know why I'm being treated this way." His glare intensified, and for a long, suffocating moment, it seemed as though the entire cafe might erupt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officer reached for his radio and announced loudly, "I'm going to need you to come with me." His words carried through the silence, leaving Alicia and everyone present with the unmistakable signal that he was determined to assert his authority at all costs. In that fraught instant, Alicia recognized that this encounter was about far more than a simple traffic stop gone wrong. It was a stark reminder of the systemic abuse of power and the racial prejudice that could surface even in everyday moments. Though indignation simmered within her, she resolved to handle the situation with the same calm determination that had carried her through countless challenges in her career. She knew that what began as a routine day off was rapidly transforming into an ordeal that could expose a deeper injustice within the system. The officer's abrupt demand sent shockwaves through the cafe. With a dismissive smirk, he returned Alicia's driver's license without a proper glance, his demeanor suggesting that he cared little for procedure or fairness. His tone, dripping with condescension, implied that her mere presence was an affront to the order he was sworn to uphold. Alicia, though inwardly seething, maintained a steady voice as she questioned, "Why am I being targeted? I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's response was curt and unsympathetic, a reminder that in his eyes, her identity was enough to justify his actions. The tension was thick enough to slice through the murmurs of the few patrons who dared to watch. Some faces betrayed pity, others discomfort at the blatant abuse of power. Alicia's mind raced back to previous encounters, subtle forms of discrimination that had been brushed aside by those in authority. Yet this was different. The humiliation was overt and public, and the officer's threat to detain her without cause left no room for doubt about his intentions. Alicia's resolve hardened. Though her heart pounded with indignation, she understood the need for caution. Accusing the officer outright in the midst of such a charged situation might provoke further escalation. Instead, she chose her words carefully, challenging him not with anger, but with the quiet authority of someone who knew her rights. "Unless you can provide a legitimate reason for detaining me, I will remain here and finish my coffee," she declared firmly. Her words, measured yet unyielding, resonated in the sudden hush that fell over the room. The officer's posture shifted, a subtle sign of his inner agitation. His eyes flashed with a mix of frustration and disbelief as he leaned in, almost imperceptibly, as if to intimidate her further. The cafe's atmosphere, once relaxed and convivial, had now turned oppressive, a stage set for an encounter that transcended a simple misunderstanding. In that moment, Alicia recognized that this was not merely about enforcing a rule. It was about asserting an unjust power dynamic that had no place in a civilized society. Determined not to be reduced to a victim, she met his challenge with quiet defiance, silently vowing that this injustice would not go unanswered. After the officer's abrupt departure, his threat lingering in the air like a bitter aftertaste, Alicia sat quietly, collecting herself amid the murmurs of uneasy patrons. The cafe, once a sanctuary of calm, had become an arena of silent judgment and unspoken disapproval. Though the officer's vehicle eventually disappeared around the corner, the damage was done. The incident, as brief as it was, had laid bare the harsh reality of racial prejudice in everyday encounters with authority. Alicia's mind churned with equal parts anger and resolve. She had experienced such unjust treatment before, but to be singled out in a public space, with every eye upon her, was a humiliation that cut deeply. Still seated by the window, Alicia sipped her now lukewarm latte as she began to strategize her next steps. Her training as an FBI agent had taught her that every action had consequences and that measured, deliberate responses were essential in confronting systemic injustice. Though she was tempted to retaliate immediately, she recognized that a calculated approach would serve her and the broader cause of accountability better in the long run. In the days that followed, Alicia refused to allow the incident to break her spirit. Instead, she began discreetly gathering information about the officer and his past conduct. Accessing records through both official channels and personal contacts, she discovered a troubling pattern. Several complaints had been made about this officer, Officer Donnelly, yet none had led to any meaningful consequence. His behavior, it seemed, was not an isolated aberration, but part of a larger, systemic failure within the local law enforcement framework. Determined to bring this abuse of power into the light, Alicia started compiling evidence. She spoke with acquaintances, listened to whispered accounts from community members, and documented every detail of the humiliating encounter. Each piece of evidence reinforced what she already suspected, that Officer Donnelly was abusing his badge to intimidate and demean those he encountered, particularly targeting African American citizens. Even as she processed the sting of personal humiliation, Alicia's sense of duty transformed her pain into a driving force for change. She understood that confronting such injustice required not only courage, but also the meticulous accumulation of proof, a task she was more than prepared to undertake. In the wake of the unsettling incident at the cafe, Alicia Carter shifted her focus from the immediate humiliation to a broader investigation into Officer Donnelly's conduct. Determined to expose the abuse of power that had become all too common, she began to work discreetly behind the scenes. Over the next few days, Alicia utilized her FBI training and insider contacts to piece together a troubling pattern of behavior. Her initial research revealed that Donnelly had a history of complaints, accounts from ordinary citizens who had been harassed, intimidated, and publicly humiliated during routine stops. Each story echoed the same themes of racial bias and overreach. Alicia's investigation took her to community meetings and local precincts, where whispers of Donnelly's misconduct circulated among residents and even some fellow officers. She interviewed a number of individuals who had encountered the officer, carefully documenting their recollections. One such account came from a local business owner who described how a minor traffic stop quickly escalated into a barrage of invasive, personal questions. Another narrative recounted how a young man's routine errand was interrupted by Donnelly's aggressive interrogation tactics. These testimonies painted a disturbing picture. Donnelly was not merely enforcing the law. He was weaponizing his badge to maintain a hierarchy that devalued the dignity of those he encountered. Throughout her investigation, Alicia maintained a careful balance. Though her personal experience had stoked her anger, she was determined to let evidence speak for itself. She reached out to her trusted colleague, Agent Stevens, who had offered his support from the moment the incident occurred. Together, they cross-referenced data from official records with first-hand accounts gathered from the community. Every detail, every complaint, and every pattern of behavior contributed to a growing dossier that underscored the systemic nature of the problem. Despite the inherent risks of confronting a figure entrenched in a flawed system, Alicia remained resolute. She knew that exposing Officer Donnelly's misconduct would not only vindicate her own experience, but also serve as a catalyst for change in a department long accused of tolerating abuse. As she compiled her findings into a comprehensive report, Alicia felt the weight of responsibility, but also the power of truth. Her determination was fueled by the hope that accountability would ultimately triumph over prejudice, and that no one else would have to suffer the indignity of being judged solely by the color of their skin. Alicia Carter's experience and subsequent investigation serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring struggle against systemic abuse and racial prejudice within law enforcement. What began as a single, humiliating encounter in a quiet cafe quickly transformed into a full-blown quest for accountability, a quest that compelled Alicia to dig deep into the patterns of misconduct perpetrated by Officer Donnelly. Through meticulous research, heartfelt interviews, and a steadfast refusal to be intimidated, she uncovered a disturbing history of harassment and abuse that extended far beyond one man's actions. Her report, built on undeniable evidence and the testimonies of those wronged, became a clarion call for change within a system that too often allowed privilege to override justice. Alicia's calm resolve in the face of overt discrimination not only preserved her dignity, but also ignited a broader movement for reform. In reaching out to community members, activists, and supportive colleagues like Agent Stevens, she demonstrated that true courage lies in transforming personal adversity into a catalyst for systemic improvement. Her determination to expose Officer Donnelly's abuses was driven by a deep commitment to ensuring that every citizen, regardless of race or background, receives the respect and fair treatment they deserve. This investigation, marked by careful evidence gathering and unyielding perseverance, has the potential to reshape an entire department. It stands as a testament to the idea that even in a system marred by bias, one person's dedication to justice can spark change. In Alicia's journey, we find not only a story of personal resilience, but also a roadmap for confronting injustice in every corner of society.